This is GrumpyOZRetro episode 7. Before we begin, there are a couple of huge events coming up in the world of retro down under, the biggest of which being the Canberra Vintage Computer Exhibition 2024, which will be held on Saturday, the 29th of June at the Radford Junior School in Bruce. Expect to see around 150 retro and vintage computers and game consoles on display, many of which being live exhibits for visitors to play around with, including the BBC Master 128 and the Sinclair ZX Spectrum Next, both of which being from my collection. If you see me there, stop by and say g'day. I'd love to meet you. Check out the Canberra Vintage Computer Enthusiasts group on Facebook for more info. The link is in the show notes. But wait, there's more. If you can't make it to Canberra, but you're in Adelaide on that same Saturday the 29th of June, ARC will be holding a retro and vintage swap meet at the Unley Community Centre. Check out the ARC Facebook group for more info. Again, link, show notes, you get the idea. I don't think there's too much bad language in this episode, but just be warned anyway, and we have had to bleep something out, not because of an especially bad word, but because we accidentally name-dropped someone. Whoops. G'day, this is Tony and welcome to GrumpyOZRetro. Our guest comes all the way from overseas. That's right, Tasmania. He's Johann from TheBasement.
There's a bin there and you look in the bin and it's full of like CRTs and beige boxes and I'm just like, I want all of that stuff, but we are not allowed to get it out of there.
Johann loves fixing stuff almost as much as Craig loves Amigas. G'day, Craig. How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good, Tony. Yourself? Pretty warm here.
Oh, yeah, it's pretty warm where I am as well. And yeah, I've been all right. Not doing a heck of a lot of retro stuff this month. In fact, I've bought absolutely nothing retro related since I've moved into this house. And I don't know, I've got some thoughts about what I'm going to be buying and what I need to do because I've got a bunch of projects and I actually have a little bit of resource so I can now buy a lot of the stuff that I've been putting off. But when am I going to get a time to install it all? So that's on the back burner still. Oh, that's right. Yeah, my Spectrum Next did turn up, but it's still in its box because I haven't had a chance to use it. That's awesome. Something. It
does sound like you've got a clean slate, though.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's a clean slate. It's something where I'm really looking forward to building my own man pad, my own man cave. And I know that as one man cave chapter's coming to a close, another one's beginning. Speaking of, how is the man pad going?
Yeah, mate, man pad's coming along pretty well. Still waiting on a bit of electrical. I've got to get some flooring in there. Yeah, look, it's you can't rush these things, and especially when you're moving piles of crap around. It's sort of a bit funny, actually. We tend to roll into our pickups and what's happened, but I come home from work the other day and my missus had emptied out my lad's wardrobe, which I'd been renting off him to stick all my computer shit in. And yeah, she just sort of laid it out on the floor. There was Amigas and CD32s and 64s and disk drives, and I can't even think of what else is there. But I was like, whoops, I guess this has got to go out to the man pad. So I was a bit annoyed because I had some shells incoming, which will come in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, ended up turning into a bit of a display, actually. I threw that up on Adelaide Retro Facebook page and actually come up pretty cool. So it was good to line that up and get it out on the shelf. So yeah, man pad,
that's looking
very
pretty
slow. Good. Yeah, cheers, mate. Yeah. I did have a couple of little pickups here and there. I picked up somebody in Adelaide Retro popped on the Facebook page. They had an Atari 400p, which they dug out of the Bunno's bin, and I went, "Oh shit, I'd love that."
Saw that.
I put my hand up, and I was the third person.
Wow.
So I just sort of sat there and was like, "Oh shit!" And then all of a sudden, the other two dudes didn't want it. So yeah, I was pretty stoked about that.
Well done, mate. That's the thing. It's amazing. Even in 2024, there are still people with this old stuff that are just chucking it instead of trying to put it on eBay or whatever and make a few bucks, which is interesting considering the other end of the spectrum, you got people finding this old stuff and are asking stupid money for it. So it's a bit of it's a bit weird, really, just sort of how things are traveling these days in terms of retro and its availability and how much it's costing or not costing.
It seems to be a bit of a great divide there between people giving stuff away or it's super cheap or you pick it up or then some wanker just thinks it's worth $1,000. So, but they're pretty rare. The keyboard was a bit wonky and stuff on it, but I pulled it to bits and it's a bit weird. It was a 9-volt AC and I found a 10-volt charger and I tried to connect it up to the barrel jack, but I couldn't really get any life out of it. So then I went, I was out drinking with a mate, and I said, I'll bring the Atari over and see if we can get it working. And he got the old alligator clips out, and we tested a few things. And, well, we couldn't get the thing to fire up. And then he turned it over because we had pulled it to bits. And he clicked on the little shield at the top where you close the lid for the cartridges, and the LED turned on. And I was like, oh, obviously you can't turn the thing on unless you got the lid closed. So dickhead me did get it working. But yeah, funny these things.
It wouldn't be the first time I've made a similar error, not with an Atari 400, but with just other things where it's something stupid like that, like an interlock that I didn't realise was there.
So I did get an Atari Max cartridge. Then I was sort of looking around for a bit, wasn't too sure what to get. And it's sort of, I was hoping to get something for the 2600 and the Atari 400/800 range. That thing's, it's a little bit clunky. I'll tell you one thing, I can see why people use Commodore 64s. This thing's got a bit of software. You got to drag and drop all the games onto it. And I'll tell you what, if there's 10 versions of Bruce Lee, 3 of them it won't let you drag it on there. 3 of them don't work when you get to the system, and maybe 1 or 2 out of the other one actually works. The 64, you just put the SD card in, copy it across, whack it in your IEC or your Kung Fu Flash, and away you go. So the Atari Max is a bit more work, but it sort of does the job. So yeah, if anyone's looking at one, I sort of ballsed up a little bit. There's a 2600 adapter and a Vectrex adapter, and this was a sober purchase, so I should kick myself in the ass. I actually thought that I was going to be sober. Yeah, I know. And I thought I was actually
shit when they're sober.
Oh yeah, it was late at night. I'll put it that way. And so I thought you could actually write 2600 ROMs with it, but no, it's for actually capturing 2600 ROMs. Same with the Vectrex. So I don't actually have any Vectrex cartridges, so bit of a waste of money there. But anyway, you live and learn. Yourself, no other pickups, Tony? When are you going to fire up the old Next?
Well, when I get it out of storage, although I must be said, I did grab one retro thing out of storage, and that's my Amstrad NC100, which was actually given to me about a year ago now by Randall, who was our guest on episode 3. So shout out to you, Randall. I've dug it out because where I've moved to, I'm not going to dox myself, but I've moved to a country town a couple of hours away from Adelaide, and it's just really interesting place. And I thought I'd sit down and start documenting just, some of the interactions, some of the people I've met, that sort of thing. I'm not necessarily a diary or a journal as such, but just a bunch of interesting anecdotes. And I figured if I wanted to do the whole writing thing as a writer, I would prefer to use something where I can concentrate on the act of writing rather than being distracted by internets and 1,700 other things going on in the background. So I've been using the NC100 a little bit. And I'll tell you what, if all you want to do is write stuff down and focus on that one task, brilliant machine.
You could be the next George R.R. Martin, dude. Completely offline, just knock out an epic piece.
Doesn't he use like a Model 100 Tandy, or am I thinking of someone else? Or does he use a typewriter? I know he uses something really old school. I'm pretty sure there's there's at least one writer out there, but still. Oh, okay. Oh, that's right. I do know.
It's something shitty. It's not on the internet, basically. Yeah.
No. There's a few authors that do that. I remember hearing about an author that used an old Tandy Model 100, which I guess the NC100 is sort of like a spiritual successor to that, but a bit more British and a bit more Alan Sugary. Did you mention something else about an Amstrad that you've acquired recently, or am I thinking of somebody else?
I was at the dump the other day in the old e-waste, and I was like, got rid of something. I looked down, I saw a bag, and it had a 5.25 inch floppy disk and a video card in there. And I went, oh, no worries, I'll grab that. And when I got it home, I popped it out, and there was about 10 5.25 inch discs and a couple of video cards, and there were some hard drives in there. And I kept digging. I pulled out this little cardboard box, and it had an Amstrad ROM switcher in it for a 464 or a 6128. And I went, oh, that's awesome. And then I kept digging in the bag, and I started pulling out 3-inch Amstrad discs. In the end, I think I pulled out 30 Amstrad discs. I was like, oh, bloody awesome, because they're so, they're not that expensive in the UK, but getting the bloody thing shipped, and then, if it does it work. So, yeah, if you need any Amstrad discs, Tony, I'm your man. So, ordered a new belt for my drive. So, yeah, that bloody
you're going to have... Well, awesome. You're going to have to take once you get that all up and running, you're going to have to take the 6128 into an ARC, and we're going to have to kind of have a bit of fun with that, because I've got to say, I think the CPC is brilliant. I mean, obviously 6128, the OG 6128 is the pick of a litter. Although, I don't know, the 464, I think it's just the colourful keys and just the fact that the form factor, it's about the same length as a Holden Commodore. Something about that just really appeals to me.
Yep, cricket bat. It's good. I like it. Rolling into eBay, Tony. I tell you what, like it always shocks you. It doesn't matter where you go, what you do on eBay. There's always some wanker who's got something that's got a ridiculous price on it. So there was a dude who's got 2 Osbornes for sale for $2,000, which is fair enough. But basically in the title of it, it said, should work fine. I'm like, hey, mate, if you got them up for $200 each, well, should work fine is, you can get away with it. But, mate, $2,000, you've been dreaming. I thought that was hilarious.
Should work fine. Wow, that's reassuring. Although one thing I would say is if he says should work fine and he's selling it on that representation and you get it and they're knackered, especially if you pay $2,000 for it, I would believe you'd easily win a dispute with eBay. So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of faffing about to go down that path, but I guess that might be. But why would you pay $2,000 for a couple of old machines that may or may not be stuffed and aren't especially rare? I mean, they're not heaps of Osbornes around, but it's not like they're. I sure as shit wouldn't pay $2,000 for an Osborne. If I was paying $2,000 for like a luggable computer, I'd be wanting an SX64 and change.
Totally, and it's not the sort of thing you can just go, "Oh, I'm just going to ship this back because it's light." It's a bloody clunker, mate. It's like luggable. Yeah, nah. Total dickheads. My other one was, it's called me weird, but like old G.I. Joe, the game, used to play it on the 64, even though I didn't really have a 64 way back then. But I spent a lot of time playing G.I. Joe, and I really wanted a copy of it. And this is the first copy I've seen pop up on eBay in a box, probably in 3 or 4 years. And it sat at $25 US for ages, and I kept watching it, and I thought I'll have a bit of a crack at this. I'm probably happy to go up to $75 or something, plus the $50 shipping. Bloody eBay. In the end, I think it went for $175 US. And I mean, it had a photo of the box, didn't even say whether the disc worked, picture of the back of the box, nothing. So, yeah, somebody's dropped, nearly $250 Australian on the old G.I. Joe. So, good luck to him.
Wow. Was the G.I. Joe game, is that especially rare, or is it just a lot of nostalgia for G.I. Joe from dudes our age who had G.I. Joe figures whilst they also had a Commodore 64 inside?
I just think so many people pirated the thing that not a lot of people bought it. It's like the Black Epics box for summer games and winter games, and it's got the sort of holographic images on it. It's probably really hard to get. So I've seen the disc sets at around $25 US plus 25 shipping, so, just for the floppy disk. So, yeah, pretty rare, I'd suggest. Too rare for me.
I'm still a little bit behind on the editing, so this ARC report is a touch late. Let's take a trip down memory lane all the way back to March 2024. It's been a while since we've checked in with ARC, and Craig, being Mr. ARC, has all the goss. What's happened over the last couple of months there?
Yeah, I guess since we've recorded a pod, which has been since that Christmas break over December, we've actually ended up with 3 ARC meets in between, Tony. So, yeah, January we normally have a bit of an Aussie theme for January, made it a free for all. So I popped on my $30 Atari STE, which the disk drive sort of half failed halfway through the night, but that's another story. So something else to fix. There was a Micro B there, which old Graham brought along, because there's somebody, every time I put the photos on Oz Vintage, some poor dude on there just whinges that there's never been a Micro B for the last 3 years at our January Aussie meet. So Graham actually said, I'm going to bring a Micro B just to shut that guy up. So if you're listening and you know who you are, then you'll have to move to another Aussie computer. There was a VZ200 that was connected to a plotter. That took a while to plot out some, I can't remember what it was actually plotting out, but that's pretty cool. There was a GameCube, a Dreamcast, and as usual, there was a whole bunch of PCs there. So that was a pretty good meet, actually. Everyone sort of back into the holiday mode.
Yeah, sounds great. It's a pity I missed out on that. Just a point on the Micro B. This is going to go a little bit off topic, so if I go too far off topic, jump in and tell me to shut up. South Australia wasn't really a big Micro B state. Now, Micro Bs were huge in New South Wales in particular, and a couple of other states, mainly New South Wales because they had government contracts. But in other parts of Australia, whilst there are a few micro Bs around, it wasn't quite as prevalent as like your Apple IIs or your BBC micros. So hopefully the gentleman who's been after micro B content, and I know a big shout out if you're a micro B user out there, because it's still an extremely enthusiastic community, really nice people, extremely helpful, and hopefully now there's been a micro B, that will kind of satisfy you for a little while, but I don't know how many more micro Bs you're going to see coming out of South Australia for the foreseeable future. So hopefully that'll assuage you for a little while.
Yeah, I reckon there's only 2 people in the club I know they've got micro Bs, so don't think we'll be seeing one for a little while. Rolling into Feb, we had a LAN, so we pre-announced that, and it's actually, we had quite a few new dudes that sort of rolled in just because we were having an old school LAN. So I think it was Quake 3 and Unreal Tournament. So yeah, we ended up having, I think there was pretty much a 16-player game going all night. Boys built me up a pretty cool Pentium 3 with a Voodoo 3 in it, so I had a pretty kick-ass. I didn't really get a chance to play it too much, but there were games going all night until somebody dropped the power. Unfortunately, I think that whole table was running off of one PowerPoint, and at some stage it just... So that was pretty funny. Everyone was looking at everyone else. It was like the old days when you used to knock somebody, go, oh, who's knocked out the bloody coax cable and dropped the whole bloody network. That was pretty funny. Declan had his massive Plexi Rider case. It's got 3 burners in it. That was pretty cool. There was a Thermaltake case there, and I used that as the cover image to drop it into Reddit and an old MS-DOS gaming Facebook page. And I think they got 680 upvotes on one of those MS-DOS pages, so that was pretty cool. I took my Amiga 1200 along with an old Luke Eddy 600 there, and we fired up the old Stunt Car Racer and a little bit of Lotus, and we played sort of back to back. But yeah, it was a good night. That LAN was a success. There's a couple of guys that had since come back. I sold a dude a P4, and he brought that along to this meet, and I left it all in its case and everything, and he just completely rebuilt. And by the end of the night, he had Windows 98 up and running, so he's a pretty happy dude that's now a member of ARC, so that's pretty cool. And this month, Tony, March was the 8-bit March, we called it. So that was a really good blend of Commodores, Ataris, there was Amstrads, there was a couple of little speckies there. Graham bought his old 8-bit Heathkit. That was pretty cool. I seen him there for 15, 20 minutes plugging away at the old keyboard. That was a bit of a laugh. I saw a nice Vader 2600, and Daniel bought his Apple II clone, which he'd been working on. I think the disk drive or the controller had shit itself. So if there's anyone out there with an Apple II, a disk drive controller that's got one for sale, hit up ARC. He's looking for one of those. There was a Virtua glove. That's the first time I've seen one of those, and a bit of the old duck hunt going on. So, yeah, look, really good mix of machines. I had that Atari 400 and an Atari 800 there set up, so I was, fighting on the Atari front. So, yeah, pretty excellent 3 months all round, Tony.
ARC meets on the second Friday of every month from 5:30 p.m. at the Unley Community Centre, and for more info, check out the Adelaide Retro Computing Group Facebook page. The link is in the show notes.
Tony, running with the underdogs, mate. So Mark from the Retro Channel, yeah, I've been watching Mark for a while. I really like his content. I know one of the lads in the club's he's just had a ROM switcher that he's developed himself for the C64. Yeah, look, I really like his content. He had Commodore 386 the other week there that him and Lurch had provided it to him, and Mark managed to get the thing running. Yeah, and then there was actually a weird ass Commodore power supply turned up on Facebook or something. We couldn't work out it was. And then literally the next week, Mark had a Commodore laptop. And we went, oh, shit, that's that power supply. So, yeah, look, Aussie guy and very easy to watch and got a lot of different disciplines, and he's very switched on. So, yeah, if you got a bit of time, I'd be adding him to your list.
I've been watching Mark for ages. He also develops quite a bit of Commodore-related stuff. I reckon he's done a couple of RF modulator replacements and all sorts of things, and he's really into pulling RGB. Exactly, the Kawari, that's right, yeah, and pulling all this RGB video out of things like Cocos and things. So, Mark, if you haven't checked him out already, absolutely check him out. I've got a couple of underdogs as well. They dovetail into my grump, though, and I'm not grumpy at these people. In fact, I've got a lot of sympathy for these people, but we'll park that until we get to the grumps. The cream. This time around, Craig and I are mixing it up a bit. We're each contributing to the cream, and we're just going to see what we pull out. So do you want to go first, Craig?
Yeah, old OSG, he's like a Pommy geezer, mate. He's got the classic Pommy accent. Really like his stuff, actually. He does it pretty much focused on Commodores, Amigas, and a little bit of Mega Drive and that. But, he does everything. And what I like about him, most of his videos only go for, 8 minutes, 15 minutes. It's the sort of thing before you go to work, you can throw it on or having a few beers, easy to watch. Things like, which is the best outrun? What are the top 10 64 games made by Ocean? He does another little hidden gems, and he'll go through, done it for the Commodore 64 and the Amiga. He'll go through each letter and he'll pull out 7 or 8 games. And, so he's, he's actually played a lot of these games and put the time in. A lot of these things that you thought you picked up and you thought was shit, he's actually given it a fair old crack and worked that it's pretty good. So, yeah, I like his content. He's a pretty cool dude.
Yeah, I've got 8-bit retro refix. It's another smaller YouTuber. He's got about 1.3k subs at the moment, very much into the Commodore. He's collaborated with a few other Commodore guys, and they speak a lot of the smaller guys, including Joseph Retrobits, who we mentioned a couple of episodes back, who's also well worth checking out. Most recent video of 8-bit retro refix was a build of a 1581 replica. I didn't even know that people were building 1581s, but it seems like there's a few Commodore guys out there that have started building their own 1581 replicas because they're pretty expensive. Last time I looked on eBay, they're around $300 US, or you could get a slightly cheaper option being the Phoenix 1591, which is a little bit cheaper and brand new. And again, I've heard great things about that. But sometimes you just want to build something. That video is well and truly worth a look.
Yeah, no, sounds cool. I think there was a bunch of cases that I think they ripped all the drives out of them and put them in Amiga. So there was somebody bought a shit ton of cases way back in the day. So, but I think they've pretty much filled it out into the community.
This Grump is old news too, but I've left it in on account of it being a specific example of an ongoing issue in the retro community. As such, I thought it was important enough to leave in.
Now we're rolling into the Grump. Bit weird that I'm normally the grumpy bastard, but I think Tony's got something to say. What's got your goat up, Tony?
Well, it's a specific example, but this is probably more of a general grump, is when you have someone that's, the pretext is that they're a member of the community and they're getting themselves involved, but they're not who they appear to be. So we're talking to grifters, we're talking scammers, we're talking someone that'll just blow in and try to put themselves in a position of authority within the group and then use that for purposes ranging from gatekeeping through to more nefarious activities. Now, what brought this on is I'm not going to name the individual who has alleged to have done some really not great stuff with the American community in particular. And if you're listening in America, this will probably affect you more than it would, say, us in Australia. But at the same time, this is an issue that happens worldwide in all sorts of places within the community. But Ron, from Ron's Computer Videos, an excellent, very Mac-heavy channel, really great channel. He's one of my underdogs for the month. Check him out, show notes, etc. He blew the whistle on a gentleman who has become quite well known in the States for doing stuff that's not kosher, and it's not just been with the retro computing community, it's been with the arcade community, it's been with other communities, and this dude has formed. I'm not going to name him, but he's got forms spanning decades, and there's receipts and all that sort of stuff to prove it. Ron put out a video last week explaining the issues he had with this gentleman, which caused others in the community to come forward, including Dave from Dave's Vintage Apple Tech channel, and that's another great channel you should get onto, another underdog. And a couple of days ago, Adrian Black actually had something to say about this gentleman also, and that's also on Ron's channel, because the gentleman in question, who has been doing some slightly shady stuff in the community, allegedly, this is all alleged, mind you, was name-dropping Adrian, and obviously Adrian was horrified because he'd interacted with this bloke in real life a few times, but it certainly wasn't what this gentleman was trying to pass him off as. So this bloke was trying to sound like besties with Adrian. And in fact, I've come across this guy on social media in the past, and yeah, he did seem a bit full on, particularly with Naboo stuff, because that's where I really encountered this gentleman, and he was trying to position himself as an authority in the Naboo space, upsetting a lot of the old guard in the Naboo community, particularly in relation to his version of the Naboo network, where he put CPM on there and took DJ Shaw's name off. My grump is that when you get dickheads like this that just make it harder to deal with the community, and it just makes you a bit more guarded. So please, just as a general PSA, if someone new blows into the community, don't completely dismiss them, but at the same time, as much as we want to welcome them with open arms, just be careful.
Nicely put, Tony. That's good that you've had a bit of got that off your chest. I watched the Raven Wolf video this morning. He was tied to that same dude, but I didn't realise Adrian was attached as well. Probably more come out the woodwork.
One side effect of first wave COVID that nobody talked about was how interest in retro gaming and vintage computing absolutely exploded. Many of us suddenly found a lot of spare time on our hands, which led to a surge in the number of retro-themed YouTube channels out there. Whilst many have died off or evolved into other things such as podcasts, quite a few have kept trucking along, including The Basement, a channel started by a Tasmanian retro enthusiast named Johann. He joined Craig and I recently to share his story. G'day Johann, how you going?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Listeners may not be aware of what it is you do and how long you've been doing it and that sort of stuff. Maybe just give us a bit of a rundown in terms of what you're all about in the retro scene.
What is it that I do? It's a good question. I tinker around with bits and bobs. I started getting into retro computers pretty recently. So from around about 2020, I just started collecting old computers, and I have a real fascination with repairing things. So that's generally the thrust of my YouTube channel, is fixing stuff.
What was your go-to moment that sort of got you into computers? Was something from your early youth, or?
Yeah, I've always been interested in computers. Slightly introverted personality, which is probably most of us in this scene. And I just really resonated with getting lost in those computer worlds, Back in about 1985, so when I was a young tacker, Dad came home with a Commodore 64. That was pretty new and exciting, the old bread bin model. And so
Nice.
We set that up and connected it to an old black and white TV that we had. And then we had to type in some games to play because it didn't come with any games. It came with a data set, but no software. So we had a book of programs and we sat down and started typing in these games. And then, you'd spend a sort of a week typing it in and debugging. And then at the end of all that, we had this game we could play. And that was just sort of quite mesmerizing as a young fella. Really enjoyed that process. And then over the sort of those next few years, some of our friends got C64s as well. In fact, one friend had the portable version, which was cool. We used to go over to his place after school and peer at the tiny little screen and play two-player games.
The SX64?
Yeah, the SX64. Yep. And that was, seeing how much they go for now, it's sort of, it's incredible. Oh, I can see one in the background there. Craig.
Yeah, I happened to pick up one at a pretty good price. Pretty happy with that. Yeah, my best mate had one as well. Sort of. Are there any games you sort of remember apart from those typing games that you used to crack along?
Yeah, so used to play lots of Infernal Runner was a really good one I used to enjoy, and the audio from that still is really good. I think like sometimes I just Google a playthrough just to hear the audio.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, just heaps from that era. I remember seeing stuff like Test Drive at like a computer fair and just being blown away with that and then getting a copy later on. And of course, back in those days, I don't ever recall buying software. It seemed to be it just seemed to be normal to be like, hey, this is the game and let's share it around. Didn't really know much better as a little kid, I suppose. But what really sort of got me interested in gaming, I'd never really had any access to any consoles. You only sort of see what you see in computer magazines and catalogs. And then around about 1986, 87, I lived in a fairly small town, but we had a department store, and they got in the Nintendo Entertainment System. And so me and my mate used to ride down into town after school, go in there, amongst all the sort of homewares and everything. And there's this sort of NES set up there with a telly, and we used to play Mario Brothers on there for hours. Looking back now, it's a wonder that the staff let us do that, but we did. And what blew me away was like, the inertia on the character and, those sort of secret levels that you could find and all that sort of stuff. And that really sort of got me into gaming. Like there's so much more when you want to scratch the surface.
Geez, you must have spent a few hours at the old Kmart there or wherever it was if you started finding secret levels. You guys are probably a good advert, actually. Probably sold a few NESs. Kids looking at it.
Well, it was funny because in those times, I don't know if the staff knew what to do with that sort of stuff. I remember being at school and we got a Commodore 64 in the classroom, and the teacher they had no idea. Like, they're like, what do we do with this? And I'm like, oh, I've got one at home. And they're like, oh, can you come up? And we loaded up Donald Duck's, what's that, Donald Duck?
Like an educational thing?
Yeah, the educational one where you've got to earn money, and then Donald Duck's Playground, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And it loaded to the opening screen, and the whole class and the teacher are standing there staring at it like, what do we do now? They didn't know what to do, and they're like, Johann, do you know what to do? And I'm like, yeah, I just walk up and push the space bar and it starts the game. And they think I'm like this computer hacker because I knew what to do. But that was the era back then. Like, it was so new, and I'm from New Zealand, and maybe New Zealand's a little bit behind, who knows? But it was just like this new world of technology, and people were sort of discovering it.
It's interesting you say you were from New Zealand and you grew up there. What was the computer scene like? What machines were popular? What were in the schools? What do you remember of all that?
Yeah, so the C64 seemed to be pretty popular. Like, we had one, some friends that I knew had one. I did have some friends that had a ZX Spectrum, which was cool. Like, we'd play some cool games on it. I remember the Jetpack game was really fun to play on there, good gameplay, but it did seem like a toy compared to the C64. And later on, I did have some friends with Amigas, Amiga 500s, and that's sort of what I remember from around then. I remember going to some friends' houses whose dads had like PCs, but the PCs just were not interesting at that time. Like, they're just like beeps and bloops and, monochrome displays, and it's like, why would you want one of these?
Magenta.
Lots of magenta. Color C64, and with audio, So for me, that just seemed way superior.
Any BBCs, Amstrads, or?
The only BBC I ever saw in the wild was I went to a friend's house, and he had moved with his family from England, and they brought the BBC with them. And so I played on that for around at his house. And that was my only exposure to the BBC. My cousin had an Amstrad. So again, he came from England, like they lived there for quite a while, and he got it over there and brought it back to New Zealand. Really, the only stuff I remember in New Zealand was the C64 stuff. I mean, sure, there was more, but it's not really something I was looking out for as a kid.
One thing you haven't mentioned yet, Johann, is Apple. Now, I know that you're a big Apple guy. Anyone that's watched your channel on YouTube, The Basement, there will be a link in the show notes, knows you're big on Macs in particular. When did you start being drawn into the Apple world and the Mac sphere?
Yeah, it's funny because I guess I'm known now as a bit of a Mac guy. But, I mean, I never really had anything to do with Apple growing up. I came across some Apple IIs, I think, in a school at some stage. I thought they were pretty inferior to the C64 again. And so I didn't really have Apple on my radar until in the early 90s, I went around to my cousin's house, and my uncle had a PowerBook laptop, which was part of his work, and he had brought it home. And I don't know what model. It's probably a 140 or a 170 or something like that. Anyway, he had this PowerBook laptop, and me and my cousin were playing on it. And it kind of, again, I had that sense of like, wow, this is really amazing. This is technology, where you've got the audio samples, the built-in trackball, the way that the operating system worked. It just seems so different and better, for want of a better word, than like text-based input and that sort of thing. And so that kind of, my exposure to Apple always sort of made it seem like it was just a bit different, something a little bit unique, something maybe a little bit better than the PC world. And that's arguable, whether it was or not. That was sort of my exposure. Then in about 2007, I had a business doing video production, and I really wanted to start using Final Cut. Back then, in 2007, I bought a brand new PowerBook 17-inch with a 2.4 gigahertz Core 2 Duo. I paid extra for the high-res screen, which was 1920 by 1200. It was a huge outlay for this machine, and that became my main editing rig for quite a few years, and then just my main sort of laptop for everything else as well. I installed, through Boot Camp, installed Windows on there, became my gaming machine as well, and that just became sort of my life, really, around Apple. And then, so because I have continued to video editing on and off through the years, I wanted to stay with Final Cut. And so that's kind of kept me in the Apple ecosystem. That kept me really connected with Apple through those hard years pre-Apple Silicon, where the hardware was really kind of pretty crappy, overheating, and they were sort of making these decisions which I didn't like, but I was tied to the Final Cut ecosystem, so I had to kind of stay with it through those years. And then now, we're at the other side with Apple Silicon, so conversely, Final Cut's taken a while now to update, and you look at stuff like Resolve, and that's got all these awesome updates coming out quite often. So I'm not feeling as tied to Final Cut as I used to. So in a roundabout way, I've kind of been connected with Apple, I suppose, since 2007 with their modern stuff. But the nostalgia factor really got me into the older Apple stuff. The design, I think, I know Craig might have issue with this, but stuff like the G4 iMac, who would do something like that? Like, what company would do that? And to me, it's pretty crazy. And yet there's a functionality about it which I appreciate. With this, the screen can rotate, can up and down, and just thinking outside of the box, stuff like that really resonated with me. I guess when I started wanting to collect older computers, that's sort of one of the things I looked into, and there was a bit around, and ended up getting a bit of it, and so now that's sort of a big chunk of my collection is the Apple stuff. Yeah, but I'm not tied to Apple. I mean, I'll go after anything that interests me.
Yeah, I've just donated one of those lampshades to Tony for his garden. I don't know whether you've seen it. So there's a picture on Adelaide Retro if you're keen. So come from the e-waste, and I thought, well,
In my defence, it was non-functional. I tested it. If it was functioning, I may have saved it potentially just to keep the Apple fans on site. But no, it was as dead as a doornail. So I thought it'd make a great garden ornament.
No excuse, Tony. You should have retrofitted it with an M1 Mac Mini.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, well, I do like the design. It's pretty cool and out there, but I just think after 10 years, I know a couple of guys that work for Apple stores and that, and they go, "Oh, those things are a bastard to pull to bits and try and fix." So they must have crammed it all into that dome pretty hard. So I think they're probably good at the time, and then but then again, a lot of these old computers are a pain in the ass to get going again. So
that's true. I mean, brittle plastics is the bane of my existence when it comes to old Apple stuff. So much of it snapped together. It was toolless and really great for the time, but nowadays, every time I've got to pull apart sort of a mid-90s Performer or some sort of Mac, I'm just cringing snapping apart those brittle plastics and just praying they don't snap off the tabs. And it's worrying.
Yeah, I've got a Power Mac 7200 and I handle that like eggs. It's one of the few computers that I have in my collection that's boxed up, and I've got fragile written in massive letters over it, because if you so much as look at them the wrong way, they'll disintegrate into powder.
Yeah, it's an issue we're all facing, isn't it?
Yeah, our club got given a black director's Mac. We thought, we can flog this off and make some, but it just basically collapsed from the inside when they pulled it to bits. So that was a bit of a joke. I sort of noticed when your videos, and I'm just putting two and two together here now, I can see you obviously got that background in video and audio. So I was watching some stuff before, and it got a good quality there. So obviously you got some half decent equipment at home. But what made you? Were you just repairing stuff out in the shed and decided, I think I should start filming this, or had a bit of inspiration from someone else, or you just said, "Bugger it, I'm going to make a YouTube channel"?
Because I wanted to be rich and famous. No, the main reason I wanted to start a YouTube channel is because the collection grew really quickly. It started with a single PowerBook Duo 280C, and I got that, and I was like, "Oh, this is cool," playing with it and getting that nostalgic sort of rememberings, and then I thought, what else is out there? And so I started finding a lot of stuff really quickly, and build up a pretty fast collection. And then I was sort of sitting amongst it all thinking, I don't want to be one of those sad old men who sits in their basement surrounded by their hoard, it just seemed a bit really sad. And so I thought, if I start a YouTube channel, it legitimizes all the stuff, and I know if I enjoy it, there must be other people out there who might enjoy it as well. And there's a little collection of people that follow me, and they must enjoy it too, which is good. And so really the heart behind the channel was to share the stuff that I've been getting. I didn't want it to just stay behind closed doors. My ultimate dream would be to have some sort of museum type situation. where people can come and enjoy it and relive their youth or whatever it is, rather than it just sort of sitting in my basement behind closed doors. That's the goal of the channel. Thankfully, its channel's now turning a very modest income, which really also helps to keep the hobby cost neutral. Well, that's my aim for it anyway, because I'm married and so we have a shared income. My wife, although she is supportive, she doesn't share my same enthusiasm for all this old crap in the basement. and so I feel better if I can, if the channel is earning some income and I can keep that hobby cost neutral, not spending our combined income on stuff that, she's not that into. Yeah, that's a little side bonus of the channel as well.
Well, if someone was looking to start a channel, what bit of advice would you give them to get into it, or just go and do it? A few tips and tricks there.
For me, having the channel, my goal is about viability. Like, you have to find that balance between quality and viability, because you can spend, weeks producing something which is maybe visually stunning and edited so tight and all that sort of stuff, but the workload level can't be so high that you do it once and then it's like, I can't face that again. So you have to find that balance between getting content out there, being happy with the quality, but having a workflow that's sustainable, so that you can sit down and you can just do it. And so for me, that's really the difficulty for anyone starting out is you got to find that balance, because if you set yourself at the bar that's too high, it won't be sustainable. You won't keep going with it. People are more interested in story than cinematics. And so, the temptation is to make it cinematically interesting. But if you don't have an interesting story, people aren't going to hang around for pretty pictures. Find that story. And for me, the story is always the repairability of something, like fixing. And that's primarily, again, just, keeping that viability, is because I'm lazy. And for me, scripting, researching topics to do like thorough reviews on old hardware, while I enjoy those channels that do it, I don't have the time to do that. And for me, it's not sustainable. So for me, I just like to repair stuff. It tells its own story, hopefully with a happy ending, sometimes not, unfortunately. It keeps everything sustainable. So that's my sort of advice for anyone starting out. Don't worry about equipment. Grab your iPhone. It's more than good enough, or your Android phone, whatever it is, and just have at it.
Excellent advice. So many people out there, it's all gear, no idea. I think the best way, from my perspective, is to cut your teeth on modest equipment, like just your phone. If you do anything over and above just using your phone to shoot video, get an external mic. That'd be the only extra bit of advice I'd suggest. And you can get a decent external mic for under $100. It would up your game substantially. That's what I've found in my experience anyway.
Yeah, audio is the most overlooked component of a good video. So definitely a good audio, really. People hang around through a video with bad footage if it's got good audio, but not vice versa.
It's not just the Mac stuff or the computer stuff you do. There's quite a bit of stuff related to vintage audio. Have you always had an interest in vintage audio?
Yeah, I have. While I hate that term audiophile because of all the wacky, weird religious stuff that goes with it, I've always had a real keen interest in good audio. And for me, the most cost-effective way to get good audio is vintage audio. I have gone down the path of modern audio stuff and spent, more money than really is sensible on speakers and receivers and things. And then I found old vintage audio gear, put it side by side, and I'm like, you know what? I prefer the vintage stuff. Like, there just seems to be a quality in that older gear that you just don't get nowadays. Everything's made of metal. You got the silver faceplates. There's no flashy lights or whiz-bang doodads to kind of get your attention. It was all about audio quality to get people's attention, and I'm talking about sort of those 70s transistorized era, early 80s. And that's sort of, just something I've always been into. And, well, it's been hard because I've lived a fairly transient life, so that's not conducive to collecting. As you guys are probably aware, if you're moving around, you can't have a collection. And so I've been in Tassie since 2014, and we've been pretty sedentary here, which has been good. So I've been able to sort of look around for deals, find stuff at auctions, and start sort of collecting that vintage audio gear. A lot of my vintage audio gear I have around the house because it's more house-friendly, more wife-friendly, I should say, than a lot of the dusty computer gear. I can have a vintage stereo set up in each room, and I can connect them all with some AirPlay devices and, have music playing through them, all that sort of thing, and get use out of them, which is really the key to having them there.
Yeah, I'll be the same, mate. If I got a bloody another 7 rooms full of old audio crap as well as computers. Yeah. It's funny though, I find the audio files, and I don't class myself as an audiophile, but I like my music and stuff. And then my lad just came in here before, and he goes, "What's that whining sound?" I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "I've got a 1084 monitor here. It must be sitting there. I can't even hear it whining." And he goes, "Oh, that's awful." That whining noise, and I'm thinking, so all these audio files out there that probably can't hear a certain frequency range anyway. So, go you audio files.
Well, that's the benefit of us being a bit older, is that we do cut out some of those annoying frequencies.
It's just got that warm sound, that old stereo. It's got that nice warm crisp sound, and that's why. Yeah, so I think I actually originally come across yourself there because I picked up a Commodore PC5. And it was pretty hard to find. Some lady gave it to me. She said, "Oh, do you want this?" Well, it was my dad's who was going to throw it out. So I go, yeah. I didn't think I was going to get it. And then I got it and I got way excited. And I was scratching around the internet. And I think Terry, maybe from over there in New Zealand, he had one, and yourself popped up. And I reckon it was a pretty old video, actually. Yeah, so I appreciated your effort on a bit of a run through of it, and it sort of sparked my enthusiasm for the thing.
Yeah, I was in the same boat when I got the PC5. I went online, and at that stage, it was only Terry's stuff I could find. So I actually reached out to him and had a bit of a chat with him about it. And then I thought, oh, well, I better make a video about it. There's not much out there. It hasn't done super well. But a lot of my computer videos don't actually do that well compared to the audio stuff. The audio stuff gets a much higher view count, which is fine. I'm not really in it for the view count. I still make computer videos, even though I know they probably won't do that well, just because I'm interested in it, and I've got to be driven by that, not by the algorithm. Otherwise, it's a slippery slope to go down.
Johann, one thing I've noticed, and it's funny how much we have in common. I mean, Craig and I also do this trash picking stuff out of the e-waste. That seems to be something that's a bit of a theme with your channel. Have you always been looking, or what's been your best find as well in that sort of situation?
What kills me is when I go to the tip, and at our tip you have to drive through the recycle station before you can go to the tip and let them go through the stuff for recycling. And so you go through there and you see there's a bin there, and you look in the bin, and it's full of like CRTs and beige boxes, and I'm just like, I want all of that stuff, but we are not allowed to get it out of there. And they're very strict on that, and that sort of thing kills me because there's just something annoying about seeing that stuff get thrown away. For me, it goes back to my audio collecting days. Well, I'm still audio collecting. For me, it goes back to my audio collecting interest. And so I used to do the rounds of all the op shops in town looking for audio gear and bargains and that sort of thing. And then it dawned on me that most of the op shops are all run by one organisation. And I know quite a few people that work in that organisation. I went to one of the managers and I said, "Hey, I spend days going around shop to shop trying to find this audio gear. Can I just go to the source? Do you guys have a warehouse where it all comes into, and I just can buy stuff from there?" He was a fairly clever fellow because they're always looking for volunteers. And so he said, "No, we can't really allow that, but we're always looking for volunteers if you want to volunteer there." And I was like, "Yeah, you know what? I've got time." At that point, I did have time. So I volunteered to work in they have a great big warehouse area where all of their donations come into, get split into all the different, clothing and bric-a-brac and household goods. And then electronics all goes down to the shed right down the back. We went down there and they had floor-to-ceiling shelves full of audio gear. And they're like, "We don't know what to do with this stuff because everyone who was testing it aren't necessarily experienced in audio gear." And they said, we need someone who knows what this stuff is and how to plug it in and hook stuff up and components and test it out. And I'm like, "I'm your man. This is my thing."
Yeah. Hell yeah.
And so I did that for quite a number of years. We're not allowed to repair anything, right? So I do a few things like change some belts, and there's minor repairs I could kind of get away with. I'd do that. But technically, we weren't really allowed to be fixing stuff. We're just meant to be inspecting it. And if it was not working or unsellable in the shop, it goes in the e-waste bin, right? And then there was other things, that would repair and get out there. And then sometimes something would come in and it was working and I really want to buy it. So I'd negotiate with we had a shop on site, and I'd take it down there and say, "Can you price it for me, please? And I would like to purchase this as staff." that's really was a great way of getting access to a lot of gear which would otherwise have just been thrown out. And, I could take it home and repair it myself. And the same thing actually happened with the computers. So the PowerBook 280C, which I mentioned before, that was the first computer that sparked this whole computer collecting journey that I've been on. That came in through the same organization, and it came across my desk, and I'm like, well, we're not allowed to sell computers because, there's data privacy issues, and we had no kind of system set up to deal with computers. So any computers that came in just went straight into the e-waste bin. And I'm like, I can't do it. I can't throw this one away. And so, again, just made a donation, took it home, and then thought, what else is out there? And just started looking around. So when I say in my videos, this came from e-waste, generally it's come from when I haven't volunteered there now for a number of years, but I've still got a bunch of tubs full of stuff that I picked up out of the e-waste bin that I thought, maybe I can fix this and keep it out of the landfill. And I do have this idea of, I think I should pop into the recycle places in town and just let them know or figure out, is there an avenue for stuff coming in? But then I remind myself, my basement is full. And if you get onto something like that, sometimes it can be quite a large flow of stuff coming in. I've left the e-waste bins for now.
That's how gets all his shit. He volunteers and helps his mob out, and they always give him.
And it's good for everyone. Like you get gear that's going to go on the tip, and they get someone helping out doing stuff, and it's just a win-win all around.
I'm pretty lucky. My guys, we've got a shipping container, and my guys I just pull up out the front, and I just walk inside the shipping. I was in there yesterday, and I pulled out a dozen hard drives or something. But last week I went out there and I pulled out a P166. Like anything was caught to 4, and they shut at 4, and I was like rolled in. There's like a beige box, and I'm like, oh, this is heaven, So it's pretty lucky actually. I dropped them some beers and stuff. I was up there yesterday, and there was like about a dozen Mac keyboards and had all the cables cut off them, like the white. I'm just like, surely they must be, someone must be chasing them, but
they sell for a bit. The Mac keyboards,
but someone obviously wants to see 2 cents worth of copper out of all those keyboard cables. They're not actually thinking that maybe those keyboards themselves might be worth, I don't know, say 100 or 1,000 times that what the copper value of the cables is. They just don't think like that.
I rocked up to the recycle place where I was volunteering, and in the e-waste bin was an IBM branded monitor, and I'm like, we had like a separate section for CRTs, And I'm like, there's a CRT there. So I picked it up, had IBM on it, had the cord cut off it. And then I'm like, I wonder if it's just part of a set. So in the other e-waste bin, I found it was an Aptiva. So I found the box, and then another bin, I found the keyboard, and everything had the cords cut. This is before my channel. So I took it home, and I found the cord in the bin of cords. So I spent ages rewiring it all back together. Yeah.
Well, that's what got me into it. My mate who works at the tip, this is like 2016. I've only been back in it 4 or 5 years. And he goes, I've got a Commodore 286 PC with a screen and keyboards come in. Do you want it? I'm just going to go to I said, hell yeah. Put that on the coffee table. And Mrs. like, what's that doing there? I'm like, I started playing California games and like Battlespire or something on there, and I was just like, oh wow, this is awesome. Then I was trying to find a set, and then I bought a 64. I really wish I had started a channel 3 or 4 years ago, because man, I would have bought 70-80% of my shit in the last 3 or 4 years now. And all those adventures you went on would have been great to film, especially during COVID. Like there was some people just emptying their bloody cupboards like no tomorrow.
Anyway. I mean, my collecting started at the beginning of COVID, and that was kind of my COVID hobby, I suppose. There was such a lot of fun in chasing those bargains. Like you'd like, maybe it was even like you'd be courting sellers for sometimes months. Like I had this guy, he was trying to sell a PowerBook 150, and like I was sort of on and off chatting with him for months until, and then eventually it came like, he's like, I opened it up and the hinge broke and the this is missing, and I ended up getting it for $15. But it was like this massive kind of like, back and forth for months and months until we sort of came to that arrangement. But it's just this fun process, I suppose.
But stuff really went up in price because there were so many of us that had the same idea. So stuff just went completely just sky high for quite a while there, like busted bread bins for like $300. Once upon a time, I remember you could get those virtually free. Even now, and stuff doesn't feel as expensive as it did 2 or 3 years ago, but it still hasn't settled down to where it used to be in the old days now that so many people have decided just to latch onto the hobby and continue with it even once things are relatively normal, I guess.
Yeah, and for me, that's why chasing the bargain is part of the fun, because I have a very low threshold for what I'm willing to pay for anything in my collection. I'm just not going to go there with those. Like, if there's something I really want, I'm just like, unless I can find it for a price that I think is fair, I'm not going to go for it.
I agree with you. Yeah, you got to find stuff that's at what you're happy to pay for. It's like an auction. You just put your bid in, and if you get it, you get it. The thing I find now is, like, I'm such an old woman with computers. Like, I will have my keyboard and I'm picking it up, and I'll take a computer to Retro Night and I wrapped it in a towel and bubble wrap. And I think when I was a kid, that thing, like, had bloody Milo and shit spilled over it, and you'd lose on a game and you just about ram the bloody keyboard through the bottom of the desk, And they survived. My old Tandy survived. The 64 survived. It's amazing how. But now I'm like such an old, I don't want to break the plastic, or I broke a key. It's the end of the world.
I got a director's edition Power Mac. What do they call it? The Performer, or whatever, the black one. And when I went to pick it up, someone had sewn like these vinyl covers that came with the printer. So one for the printer, one for the keyboard, and one for the computer.
That's awesome.
And for me, that was kind of like, that's actually really cool. Like, I really appreciate that. And it's the same. I've got some cinema displays, the old Perspex ones, the Mac ones, and they came with like sewn covers, that go over. It's like, yeah, excellent.
Must be a Mac thing, because my Mac Plus came with something like that, and it had this lovely, really 80s looking fabric that was used. It looked like a pillowcase, just like spirally or whatever.
Hey,
and
Mac
it looks
people
awesome.
care, right?
They do.
Mac people care.
What's the chance of Mac owners having nano rugs for their Macintoshes?
Well, I sewed together a microfiber pouch for my my iPad, so that when I carry it around, it protects it and also keeps it clean when you slide it in and out.
iDoilies, anyone?
iDoily, yeah. While we're just chewing the fat there, Johann, what's the retro scene like in Tassie? Is there any groups around, or?
I've looked around, and I know a few people locally here in Launceston, where I am. We kind of just informally catch up and share deals or things which we know what the other person might be into or collecting, and we see something, we sort of flick through a message. But as far as anything organised, there's nothing here that I've come across. There seems to be a sort of a fairly spread out group. I do come into contact with the same sellers from time to time, which can be convenient because they know I'm a good buyer. I'm good for my word, and I'll show up when I say so and pay a price that's been asked. Otherwise, no, there's not much going on. I'm actually really jealous, when you guys talk about the Adelaide group that you guys go to. I'd love to see something start up here in Tassie like that, but it's like herding cats sometimes with collectors. We're all a bit on the spectrum, I reckon, and so it's a bit hard to sort of tie everyone down to commit to something.
Yeah, it is a fair bit of work, which I just rolled in and hadn't been rolling for quite a few years. So, and it's sort of self-organising now. Everyone turns up on the second Friday, so it is a good thing. You must have a bit of a grump. What's the thing that sort of shits you? Tell us
what gets me going? It's deliberate unrepairability. I hate that. Like, why design something and it's designed to be a temporary product? That really gets me going. But on the flip side, what really gives me much delight and joy is fixing stuff that's not designed to be fixed. It's like a real, up yours to the manufacturer. I had a VW Passat, and the rear tailgate stopped working. It had like an electric button, to open the tailgate. And so I pulled the unit out, and there was like a little plastic bracket inside the sealed unit that had snapped. And so, you contact VW and you got to buy like this whole assembly bit to just get that thing replaced. And so I'm like, you know what? Stuff you, I'm going to fix this. And so, pull it apart and plastic weld it all back together and get it working. That's my biggest grump. And especially with not so much the older computer gear, but, modern computer gear, it's just consumer items now.
Totally.
And I guess that's the great thing with the older machines, the fact that computer companies were so forthcoming with all the information you'd need, the schematics, the technical documentation and so forth. Quite often you'd actually get it as part of the machine itself, but even if it wasn't, you could buy that for a modest fee. And even with a lot of the audio gear, getting back to that, you probably, particularly like when you lift the lid off of an old bit of audio gear and you can see the schematics printed inside the lid, you go, wow, this is fantastic. Yeah. Where the hell did we go wrong as a society?
Yeah, I love that. I pulled the lid off my 80s Sony system, and there it is, the whole schematic for everything. Not that I'm very good at reading schematics. I'm very much an amateur when it comes to repairing things. But yeah, just that idea that, a technician, this is for a technician to come in here and repair it. doesn't need to be replaced. I love that.
What about your own show, mate? How do people get access to the basement? I struggle to find it a little bit. There's a lot of basements out there.
In hindsight, I should have called it something a little more unique. But it's the YouTube is the Basement channel, all one word. If that's something you're into, come and watch. Don't come and subscribe just to be nice if you're not interested in the content. But if you are interested in the content, come and have a look and see if it floats.
I'm a bit of a fan of the wood grain. So more wood grain and silver, the better, I reckon.
Thanks again to Johann for his time, and I reckon that's a wrap, Craig.
Thanks for listening to this semi-extended 3-month roll-up of Grumpy Oz Retro.
Until next time, see you later.
Stay grumpy and stay retro.